me on this side of the call, we have about 26 of everyone's here, but I know everyone isn't here. But over 20 of our great fall 2011 leadership students. And I want to introduce you to Molly McPherson. Molly was a sophomore. Weren't you, Molly, when you took my class in the spring?
Yes, I was.
She took class early in her career here at St. Vincent St. John's. And I remember back during our one-on-ones, you had talked about the fact that you were really interested in gaining a global perspective. And I think your journey to global is a little unique. And so maybe we can just launch with you sharing your story. What we hope to do today is just maybe have you hit on some of the observations you have in leadership and followership too, and make it more of a conversation. But since you can't see the audience, I'll be kind of forwarding on this end perhaps questions that our students might have of you as they think about their journey in global.
Okay.
So I'll turn it over to you, Molly, to share your story.
Perfect. Well, I'll start with how I ended up in Hong Kong. I'm actually living on a houseboat in Hong Kong, which I never thought that I'd be doing, sitting in my chair as a sophomore. But I came to Hong Kong after living in Montana. Straight after graduation, I went and worked in Montana at a resort, Dude Ranch kind of thing, and was leading hiking trips. Did that for a summer, it's just a seasonal position, and then moved back to Minnesota, was working for a marketing firm for Target, and it was a good job, did it for about 6 to 9 months, but I just felt like the world was way too large outside of my cubicle to not go explore. So I went back to Montana just for a summer with intentions of moving abroad after that, not quite sure where I was going to go, what I wanted to do. But on my first week back to Montana, I met a lady while hiking, and she asked me right away if I would come move to Hong Kong to nanny for her girls. I was like, it's perfect. It must have been fate. So I moved up to Hong Kong, straight from Montana, probably the biggest culture shock of my life. And that was last September, so I've been here for just over a year now. And the reason why I decided that I wanted to go global, I kind of always had it in my head that I wanted to go abroad, but I think it was once, ironically, I got my position with the marketing firm that I realized you don't actually have to follow this strict career path straight after university. And I just wanted to go explore while I could, do something that I would do now, that I have the time to do now, that I wouldn't be doing when I'm 40 years old. So I figured I could work in an office the rest of my life if I wanted to. So that's kind of how I ended up in Hong Kong. Can you still hear me okay?
We can hear you okay. So the family, are you still working with that same family?
I am working with them, and I've kind of spent the last year and a couple of months in Hong Kong kind of as a way to work while travel. I took off January and February last year to go travel, and then this past summer I took about 3 months to go traveling as well. And I'm now at the point where I've decided that I want to stay in Hong Kong but progress my career while I'm here. And so I've just kind of been networking with people now, and I've been having some pretty good leads that do events and marketing in Hong Kong when I come back in January, February time. So I've kind of taken it as a year to be able to go travel while working abroad, which is amazing. I wouldn't have done it any other way. I think that just kind of goes along with take whatever opportunity you can to go explore. Obviously, nannying isn't something that is going to be down my career path, but I took an opportunity when I had the option, and I've been able to see amazing places and experiences that I never thought that I'd be able to see, and I never thought I'd be doing while sitting in class as a sophomore. I would never picture myself doing what I'm doing now, what I've had the opportunity to do.
So, when you think about where you're at right now, and certainly Minnesota to Montana is a little different by stretching yourself that way, but then you decided to go from Montana directly to Hong Kong, and you noted that it was kind of a shock, if you will, or it was very different than what you expected. What was most surprising to you as you entered a global context?
I think Hong specifically, I didn't really have any idea what to expect. Just expected to see a crazy city, people everywhere, buildings everywhere. I was like, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to like it. And a lot of my friends and family, they're very supportive, but they were kind of like, come on, Molly, what are you going to do in Hong Kong? You're outdoorsy and all of that. So I was actually very pleasantly surprised when I came to Hong Kong. It's a lot more tropical, and there's actually a lot more space once you get outside of the city. And I was also very surprised by how many, they call it expats, so someone that's foreign, that's living and working in a foreign country. So there's tons of Western people here. It was so easy to meet friends. Everyone's so welcoming, and it's like going to university abroad almost, because everybody's away from their home, so everybody's welcoming each other in. So I was very, very, very pleasantly surprised by how much more comfortable it was than what I had been expecting. But also, at the same time, there's the huge city, and that's definitely not anything I'm going to discount. It's extremely overwhelming compared to Montana. So I had definitely the shock of that feeling. People were on top of me up there when I was in the city, but it was definitely a pleasant surprise when I came.
Molly, we're having a little bit of difficulty with the audio, so could you just repeat maybe that last part of what you said, because it wasn't 100% clear.
Yeah, was it the part about being pleasantly surprised here?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to repeat myself, but I talked about how I was very pleasantly surprised by how friendly and welcoming everyone was here. It felt like I was going to university, because everybody's home away from home here. Everyone welcomes in and wants to get to know what your story is, why you're here, and yeah, it was amazing and so easy to meet friends here, and networking here. It was amazing. Can you hear me okay?
Now, yes, we can hear you. Every once in a while, I think it is because of the connection and the time of day, and just being the volume of things going across the internet. It might just be a little tough here today. So, thinking about leadership and your thoughts about in your journey of thinking about leadership from the time you were here and your work in Montana and now in Hong Kong, how have your maybe impressions of people in leadership, you being a leader, how has that evolved now with your experience being in Hong Kong?
Right. Well, I saw that question ahead of time, and I kind of wanted to reposition into how it pertains to the article you said. And what I took from that was the three major ideas about a global leader, what they feel are the essential elements. And I couldn't agree more with them. It's not until you really are global and you are abroad that you can fully understand it. I think you can read it and you can understand what they're saying, but you don't know the full depths of it until you are actually living abroad or being a global leader. So the first one they had said about having a global mindset, and fortunately I've been able to travel a lot since I've been here. I've spent a good probably 5 months of the past year traveling. And from my travels I've met so many people from different places all over the world, every nook and cranny of the world. And even just living in Hong Kong, all my friends are British, Australian, South African, and it just makes you feel a lot more globally in touch, and the world doesn't seem as big as it used to. And another point that he had mentioned out was having a self-authored identity. This I definitely can agree with, and I think from this it's just knowing yourself and staying true to yourself. You have to embrace a lot of change and complexity. I faced so many situations where I've been in travel situations where I've been in the middle of Cambodia, and it's figuring out what to do when you're out in a rural place and not quite sure how to get back to where you are, and there's just a lot of uncertainty that you face while living abroad, I think, and it's just going back to staying true to yourself and what you know is your own identity and following that. And I think also it's necessary to have confidence in yourself while being a global leader. The reason I say that is because you face a lot of different cultures and people, and it's easy to kind of get your identity mixed up with that and almost lost within that. But just having true confidence in yourself goes a long way living abroad, and I think a lot of my friends here definitely appreciate that, because most of my friends are British and Australian from completely different backgrounds. I haven't met one person from the Midwest and Hong Kong, so it's always kind of a treat for people to meet that, I think. And the last part that they had talked about was having adaptation worldview. And I think for that it takes having a lot of patience and understanding. I definitely feel adapted to Hong Kong because I embrace the complexity here. While, I mean, I'm living in Hong Kong is technically China, well, it's a city-state of China, but you deal with a lot of Chinese people here, and just their mindset and how they work with things is very different than how Western mindset works. They're very process-oriented, and it's understanding that and taking patience with it. For example, just a couple days ago, I left a bag at the gym, and they collected it to security. And it's just their system, their process, that you have to show a passport. But I explained every single item that was in my backpack, said everything possible that I could, and they still just have a very process-oriented idea that you have to follow what the big man says. So I had to go all the way back to where I'm living and get my passport all the way back, even though it was very clear that it was my backpack. It's just very process-oriented. So it's understanding that, understanding where you are, just having to go with it and adapting to it. I think it's also accepting and expecting different cultures. When I did traveling this past summer, there's a lot of different cultures that I encountered, and it was taking the time to understand what their culture was about so that you knew you were respecting the place. I would come across a lot of travelers that probably didn't really take the time to explore a culture and a place and experience, and you could tell they didn't really get the full length of the travel experience, which is unfortunate. And I was able to go off track a lot while traveling, really seeing a culture and I'd go explore and just see these random villages where none of them spoke a lick of English and didn't even know how to say hello, and it was seeing those places that really made me feel like I was getting a world that I was seeing. The main thing I wanted to touch on for how I've seen a global view from the article that I read that you had sent over.
Thanks for touching on that, and that's the Clark article that you're going to be using and thinking about What questions might you have as some of the folks in the audience? Scott has a question.
When you're traveling, you said you spent like 5 months traveling. Did you travel by yourself, or were you with somebody or an interpreter or anything like that, or was it basically you just kind of going and see where it takes you?
So Scott asked the question about you independently traveling in groups. How do you go about maybe selecting the destinations you're going on to? I'm curious about that.
Well, just within my group of friends in Hong Kong, there's so much traveling at the back doorstep or the front doorstep of Hong Kong, and so it was just kind of talking to people where they've been, what they liked. So I had a pretty good game plan of where I wanted to go. I didn't know exactly where I was staying, what I was going to be doing there. I booked a one-way flight to Bangkok. I knew I was going to be gone for 3 months, and for 3 of the weeks I was going to volunteer at an orphanage in Cambodia. So I had that many people when you're traveling, and it's when you're going to specific places along your travels. Maybe if it's being more in the mountains and more outdoors, you tend to meet more people that follow similar travel plans as you. And so when I was in Thailand, I ended up meeting, there's about like a group of 9 of us that kind of all met and came together and traveled with them for a while. And within that, there's 2 Dutch brothers that I'd met, and I traveled with them for about a month because we had the same kind of plans along our travels. And then 2 of my friends from Hong Kong came and met me for about 3 weeks. I split up from them and went by myself again for about 2 more weeks before coming back to Hong Kong. So yeah, I mean, I never really felt like I was by myself because, like what I said, you're always meeting people along the way. So many people are doing the same thing that you're doing, and I definitely have intentions of trying to do one more travel trip before I leave Asia at some point someday, if that happens. If that answers your question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you right now. I'm just seeing who else may have. I had a question and now
Hello?
Molly?
Okay, good. Did you get that last part? Did I answer your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
it did. Thank you. So, Molly,
Yeah?
you are now starting to do some work with a nonprofit in Hong Kong. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Hello?
Molly, can you hear us?
Yeah.
We're flashing red on this side, so from time to time we're just cutting out. So I apologize for that.
Okay.
I just had just mentioned your new nonprofit or your social entrepreneurship work that you're just starting to do. Do you want to share a little bit about what that is and how you got connected with the organization?
Right. Yeah, I originally got connected with the organization before I left for travels because I knew I wanted to volunteer along the way. And so this was through just kind of a friend of Hong Kong. That's kind of how it works here. And so I connected with them to see if I could volunteer at the location in Nepal, but they weren't accepting people on location. So they said to contact them when I'm back in Hong Kong, as they may be looking for people that are based in Hong Kong to help with the charity group. And so I just started with them in September, and it's been extremely fulfilling for me, especially coming back from volunteering at an orphanage for 3 weeks in Cambodia. It's kind of hard just to leave that and turn the other way. I've been pretty involved with them. I'm trying to apply more for grants. I have some experience doing like web design and getting Google Analytics involved with that. And so it's really nice to feel so appreciated by somewhere, to feel like you're really giving towards a place that really needs your time. Sometimes that gets a little lost working for such a well-off family in Hong Kong. And it's definitely a location that I want to visit. It's in Nepal. It's such a location I want to visit on my next travels.
Great. And when you see Paul in the next couple of weeks, we have an alum in Nepal that...
I'm not quite sure if you have specific questions about the charity, but...
Well, what is the mission of that group? Did you hear the question about what is the mission, or what does that group do? What is their focus?
I just got the last part of your question. I think my Skype is down. Yeah. They operate off of 3 different sections within their charity. So they have one that's centered around teaching mothers how to kind of be mothers in a way, how to be housewives, teaching them about nutrition, how to raise children, because none of them are educated, and so when their child gets a fever, they will wrap their baby in a blanket because they're not sure how to take care of their children. So one is centered around teaching moms how to care for their children and how to cook and all that. Another is centered around education. So it's educating those children. They have a lot of schools that have opened up in Nepal for the children. And then the third one is helping women come out of essentially slave jobs that they've been put in for Nepal. How it works is the dad will basically sell their daughter for a cow or a pig or something that has value to it. And these women get put into these roles where they basically are slaves, but they can't buy themselves out of it. The families can't buy themselves out of it. And so they money to help buy these women out of these essentially slave jobs. So that's what the charity that I'm volunteering for, what they do. They're actually connected to a larger scale charity, and these are just the 3 areas that this charity works on. But within this charity that they belong to, they're also getting very involved in the sex trafficking in Nepal, as that's a pretty big issue there. So it's just getting women out of the sex trade, basically, there. Situation's getting a lot better, but unfortunately, it's kind of a milestone that's difficult for the charity to cross just because of the government in Nepal and just how corrupt it is. They can't just go in there and do what they please. There's a lot of red tape that comes with the government, unfortunately. So that's what the charity all operates under, and so my main role is kind of for them, prospecting for potential funders, and the position that they're trying to turn into a full-time, more of a part-time paid position that we do while pursuing other opportunities here, which is exciting.
Well, I know that Paul Marsnick is excited to see you when he's visiting Hong Kong in a couple weeks or next week. And when you see him, ask him about the St. Ben's alum that is involved in kind of work in the Nepal area as well. He'll be able to go into some detail, and perhaps there's more opportunities there too for you to connect.
Oh yeah, are there?
Oh, what other questions might you have?
St. Ben's alum that are, you said through Nepal?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Originally
That
from
last part kind
Nepal,
of
yeah.
I'll talk.
Talk to Paul about that. Yes.
You mentioned networking in Hong Kong. How is networking there different than back in the States?
What was the?
Heather's question was, you've networked a lot and connected with people significantly in Hong Kong. Is it different than here in the U.S.?
Yes, I find it very different. It just goes along with the whole meeting friends here, meeting people here. Everyone's been in a situation in Hong Kong where they're new to Hong Kong. They're looking for a certain career area to get into. And I'm almost overwhelmed with all the contacts that I have to reach out to that I've gotten from people. Everyone wants to see everyone excel in Hong Kong, and so everybody's very open to connecting them with certain contacts. Or I've met with so many people that are in industries that I want to get involved with, and so many people take their time out to come and meet with you. And I find when I was applying into jobs in Minnesota, it almost seemed like there was a very strict code that you had to follow. Like it was, you're always sending your resume applications online, and I kind of felt like it was just going to a black hole. Whereas here, it's you're meeting the people, you're meeting where your resume is going to, what companies you want to get involved with. You're meeting people that are in the operations behind the company, and so yeah, everyone just really extends an extra helping hand here. And I think it's also almost threatening to people too, in a way. Like my friends know that I want to stay in Hong Kong, and if I don't find a job that I would stay here for, it might mean me going back to Minnesota. And so everyone kind of extends their hands out too, and if they know somebody, then they connect you with that person. And yeah, it's just a very, very, very networking sort of on many different levels.
Molly, if you can remember back a year ago when you first got there, though, what were the very first things you did to begin the network? Because sometimes in networking, it's those first couple of activities that then starts the ball rolling, where other people are referred to you and you then get connected with other people. What would you recommend as first steps for others that are coming into a culture for the first time, or particularly a cosmopolitan culture like Hong Kong, where people are from all over the world are coming together since it's a major commerce center?
Right. Just saying yes to everything. Like the way that I met so many people was my first week. I met one girl who was also a nanny. Luckily, I met her right away, and she invited me to come out with her and some of her friends. And I was like, okay, great. And it was going to be out on like a boat cruise kind of thing. I was like, wow, it's kind of intimidating going on a boat where I don't know anyone but this one person who I just met. I was like, nope, I just need to do it. And I met tons of people just from that. And then, I mean, it just goes back to how friendly and welcoming these people are. They're like, oh, you just moved here, that's great. Stay in touch, here's my number. This is what we're doing next weekend, come join us. So it's really just saying yes to everything and not feeling nervous or overwhelmed to go into these new situations. And I think it's a lot different here just because it's a very transient place, so there's lots of new people coming in and out. So it's not just always your core group of friends, whereas I think somewhere like Minnesota where you have your core group of friends and you're not quite used to, university I think is different. You're still meeting different people at college, but I think when you get out of that, you kind of stick to your core group of friends that you've made from college. And it may be a little intimidating, it would be intimidating to go meet a completely different group of people. It's just not as normal, whereas here it's very accepted and welcoming. So that's really how I met people, was just saying yes to everything. And obviously you meet a whole wide range of people, and some you get on with really well, some not so much, and it's kind of filtering down who your close friends come from that. And the day that I do leave Hong Kong will be really difficult because I've made lifelong friends here, and your friends become your family because everybody's here away from home, not with their family. I mean, I feel like I have sisters and brothers and moms here that act as my family.
What other questions?
That answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
And also, I guess Hong Kong is a little bit of a different situation because it is such a melting pot where you can experience the culture here, obviously, but it's also a very British influenced culture because it used to be a British colony just back in '97. So it almost feels like you're living in an Asian New York or an Asian London. It's quite an interesting place because it is such a melting pot. And so it's maybe not so much the culture that it is a culture in itself, but I have such a huge Western influence here that it's not that I'm facing a huge culture shock.
Molly, refresh my memory, did you go abroad when you were here at St. Ben's and St. John's?
Yes, I studied in Ireland, the Galway program, my junior in the fall.
And you were with Jane and Michael, weren't you?
Jane and Michael.
Catherine?
No, are you asking who my advisor was?
Right, the faculty.
My advisor was Eric Putnam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Are there any more questions? Otherwise, I have questions for the students.
Okay. I think go with your question.
Okay. Well, I can't see your video anymore, but I was just going to ask how many students in the class have ideas of going abroad or are interested in going abroad?
Yeah, I would say it's growing hands, so about 2/3 of the class have raised their hand that they are interested and have interest in going abroad.
2/3 of the class.
Yes.
And would that be mostly for studying or moving abroad and living and working?
If I understood you, if our connection's breaking, was your question, are you interested in studying abroad or moving abroad and working abroad?
Correct, yeah. Like they can see themselves after college going to live and work abroad.
How many of you live and work abroad? You probably have maybe 6 or 7, 8. So
Okay.
many. So
Sorry,
what
what was
advice
that?
would you, many.
Okay. And can most of these students realistically see themselves moving abroad, or what kind of steps they would see themselves making, kind of where they would want to go and do?
What might you want to do?
I mean, what steps would you advise as somebody who would like to go abroad to take? What's the best ways? How to connect?
What are the best ways? I would say just take advantage of any opportunity that would present itself. To be honest, when I was presented to go to Hong Kong, I wasn't dead set on it. It wasn't my top choice at all. But that was just because it was so foreign to me. I mean, I didn't know anything to expect. And I'm so glad I did, because Asia is amazing. I know I wouldn't have experienced it if I didn't. So it's just saying yes to any opportunity that may present itself. Probably you may hate it, but you have your home base that you can come back to. Or you may love it and you are there a year and a half later. And it's also connecting with anyone that you know that would be abroad and what they do, how they got there, any opportunities they may see for someone that's moving there. Hong Kong, there's so many friends that move here, friends of friends that move here, and everyone's so helpful in getting people in touch and getting them into jobs here. So it's really just networking with anyone that you know that's living abroad and just seeing, first of all, what they do, why they like it. It's good to have an idea before you go somewhere if you think it's going to be somewhere that you like, obviously, would be my suggestions. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you okay. I'm just scanning to
Okay.
see if we have other questions from the group.
Okay. Yeah, those are kind of my main questions, and I definitely suggest that if you are at all interested in living, I know it seems a bit overwhelming and probably somewhat nerve-wracking. I know as I was deathly afraid of stone first coming over, but it's definitely worth it. It gives you such a different worldview that you would never get just from reading about it or hearing about it. And I find it difficult to explain or to share with friends at home that haven't gone and done it, because if you haven't done it, it's difficult to understand. I think maybe for some of you that studied abroad, you may find the same experience, that you have this amazing 5-month trip where you live somewhere and you have all these great experiences to write home about. But if you're not explaining it with someone that you can share it with, it's difficult to really have them understand it without them having a similar experience.
That's the importance of all those friends that you've made.
Pardon?
That's the importance of all those friendships you've made while you're there to share it together with.
Right. That's why you do become so close, is because you all understand what situation you're going through. You've all had similar travel experiences that you can share with each other. And you don't feel like, a lot of times when I talk to my friends back home in Minnesota, I almost feel like I'm bragging about what I'm doing. And so it's difficult to explain it with someone, to share your experience just so that they understand what you're doing, as opposed to feeling like you're bragging about it. So a lot of my experiences I sort of keep to myself. I'll explain with my family, but beyond that, it's kind of difficult to explain your experiences when the other person, on the other hand, hasn't had similar experiences.
Before you talked about the influence of the Chinese in Hong Kong, since it's a city-state of China, how would you observe kind of the spectrum of leadership in the different places that you engage? You know, observations or characteristics of a Hong Kong leader, someone who leads in that context.
Right. I would say that it's somebody that's very open and welcoming and extends an extra hand out. Just with its proximity to China, even though it operates under democracy, you still have a very, very strong communist influence here, just because of a lot of the Chinese that are living here. And the Chinese I don't want to completely put them all in one group, but in general, usually the culture of Chinese is to be more standoffish. They don't really come out as leaders so much. They don't really like to go against the norm or to step outside of the box. That's just not really innate in their culture and their upbringing. And so really to become a leader in Hong Kong, I find, is somebody who isn't afraid to push the box, to push the limits, because it is accepted here, because it is such a Western influenced country, I guess you can kind of say it's a country. So it's, yeah, kind of going, not against the culture, because you aren't necessarily going against the culture, as it's not technically in China. It is and it isn't. It's difficult to kind of explain. So yeah, standing out like that, not being afraid to take risks.
So a lot of similarities to some of the leadership things that we talked about when you were here. We're getting close to 2 o'clock, and I want you to be able to go back to bed. But in closing comments or things you want to share with the students, are there some last things that you have on your mind?
Yeah, I guess just maybe advice to any of the students. I guess what I would say, just from my experience, obviously I've been in an office before, and I've been living in Montana, I've been living in Hong Kong, and I would just say don't feel like you have to do what you have to do just because of the social norms, or don't feel pressured that you have to know what you want as your career right away. I'm still exploring that and finding that out for myself. And I don't think I really questioned it before I was living abroad, just because I knew that I wanted to do marketing or advertising. I didn't really know exactly why, but I just knew that that was kind of what I decided to do in college, not really knowing exactly why. So it's just really explore what it is that you have passions about in life and work towards that goal. Don't just find yourself in an office job just because you feel like it's the safe route and that's what you're supposed to do. Obviously that is a route that works for many people, and if that's what your passion is and if that's what you're happy doing, then amazing. But if that's not it, don't feel like you have to be doing what everybody else is doing. You have the rest of your life to work, so go explore while you can if you have that urge to do it, and just take advantage of any opportunity that you can. I think it gets to, I remember being a senior and not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do, and was kind of freaking out about it. And I always went to my dad as a mentor, and he just said to go, if you know what you want to do, if you have confidence in yourself, you'll find yourself in the right situations. So it's knowing what you have passion for and working towards that. Yeah, and don't feel like you have to know exactly what it is that you want to do. This is the time to go explore yourself, to take the summer months if you can to go travel, and you find so much more out about yourself than you would in an office job. I know it's not an opportunity that everybody can take advantage of, but I didn't think it would be an opportunity that I could take advantage of that. But you may make it work.
Great advice. Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Molly, for getting up in the middle of the night to join us. Thank you, Molly. And Paul will be relaying our greetings in person soon. And again, thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.